simple instructions take a lot of practice to put into effect. Because of our conditioning, is one of relating to things in complex ways. And in meditation, although there is a lot of instruction and the terminology can seem like further complexities, there's certainly difficulty, and yet the variety of the teachings is just trying to put across the same perspective and practice, well, many different ways, find the way which will click for different people's conditioning. So we have to, this word reflect, scan, consider, recollect. And all mind has to be taken into account, mind conditioning in all meditation. And when we are, say, practicing meditation on the body, you have to take the mind into account, don't you? It would be nice to say we could just be objective. They would just focus on the body and be objective. Hey, this is the body, this is feeling, breathing. Just know it as it is. This is true, to know it as it is, but our attempts at being objective are often very subjective. When we feel we're being analytical, often we are actually making an assumption rather than an accurate contemplation. So, through practice, one begins to experience, say, the biases of the mind, and without even needing to absorb into the mind, with using the body as a samatha, as a concentration, as a calming mode, so that the rhythms of the mind become a little more opened or less tangled. And then reflecting. This is rather like the body image becomes a mirror, where you can see the way that you look at or don't look at, and even some of the movements away. Now, in contemplation, one of the drawbacks is if we start asking why is it like this? Because all you can ever find when you ask why is an idea, a thought, which doesn't get you anywhere really. But to notice as it is, movement away is like this. This is how it is. It happens this way. This is a more productive for insight. Contemplation of the body internally and externally. Rupa, the khandha, the aggregate, the category, class of form. And yesterday I was talking a little bit about transmuting what we call the body into elements for contemplation. You can transmute the body into just elemental quality, elemental properties, weight, matter, mass. And these four elements comprise all of the whole world of form, internal, external. Other people's bodies, the seat that you're sitting on is like earth, isn't it? Solid matter. When you're walking on the ground, you feel earth. And then to bring these symbols into action as for contemplation, and we're using them symbolically. You're not actually saying the body's made out of clay or mud. Looking at food as earth, the earth element, solid matter, isn't it? Now what happens when we do that? It jolts some of our conditioning, our normal biases, into what we like, we don't like, we wish it was this way or that way. It's form in front of the eye. Or even chewing or feeling the solid matter, and it turns into liquid matter, doesn't it? Then it disappears. So form is impermanent, changing. What you can know, and if you keep contemplating like this internally and externally, you find yourself just coming back to these truths, these simple characteristics of existence. So we're actually making the vast and complex, baffling world, with all its proliferations and forms and profusions, into something that's manageable for us. Not saying it is this way, or it is that way, or it isn't. But this is a way to cultivate a response whereby that response is able to be freed from the normal conditioning that's been established around the world. The seeking this and the seeking that, the getting caught into details of this, that and the other. We live in a society where there are so many choices that we can develop super refined preferences over this and that and the other. Most people would not, say, consider eating food as, just something to stop me feeling hungry, or something to keep the body together. They say, and then the various ideas. That organic food, or whole food, vegetarian, or proteins, vitamins, which at least is coming from a good idea, isn't it? That which is perhaps most nutritious for the body. Other times that which is most delicious, or rare. The lion's paws, or something extremely rare, as to satisfy a mind's idea. We can project mind states onto the world. Now, seeing things as in these elemental forms is, of course, simplistic, but it's a symbol. You're not taking poetry as mathematics or as philosophy. You're taking it for what it can evoke in the mind and what it can clear the mind from. So if you want to, you want to know how to fix an engine of a car, you don't read a poem of Blake, do you? To look at an engineering manual, it's this and that and the other. But then the purely rational, literal interpretation of the world is okay for just functioning on the mechanical level, but for enlightenment, it doesn't. Just what are the effects? We feel somehow strangely abstracted. We don't feel, it's difficult to put your heart into it. One feels only a part of one's system is working. If we're just tinkering with our bodies and minds like fixing the engine of a car. You could do it very accurately and have it all worked out. And yet somehow there's a whole lot lacking, or we haven't touched upon their enthusiasm, devotion, generosity, kindness, patience. You haven't really, those can become just more ideas. Okay, now get the patience out of the toolbox. Here we go. Then give it 3 twists with some loving kindness. And these make all these spiritual qualities rather inert. though we're just using more poetic, because poetry and symbolism can reach areas that normal vipassana cannot reach. Refreshes the parts that pure technical expertise cannot reach. But of course you have to have the skill and the straightness and the dexterity. So you're looking at the Satipatthana, how the Buddha was talking about simple ways of designating the breath, then the body, looking at that in symbolic terms or in more figurative terms. And the Buddha's teaching is actually, a lot of it is extremely figurative. So I like to call the five khandhas, the five aggregates, which to us is rather, can't even really get to terms with the words. Somehow bunching up form, all form, internal and external, feeling, consciousness, then there's perception or associative recognition, and mind formation. See? It's a figurative thing. You can't kind of cut them out of the body, or even really see where one ends and the other begins. These are expressions for reflection that we look into. But then when you use them, they're exceptionally helpful. Form. We've got a feeling for what form is. And yet if you look directly into, say, the form of the body and experience it directly, it's no longer form, is it? I mean, what do we experience our body as? But as somehow flowing energy changes, things that we feel attracted to or averse to, rhythms, not actually solid matter at all. But the symbol is helpful. So, for reflection, you sit down in the bodily form, okay, within this context, and then how we can look at that. Now, to broaden and to contemplate the development of cultivation is so that we're not getting into a kind of an on-off rhythm. Many people find this with retreats, that you're on, and then there's breaks when you're off. And then after retreat, you're definitely off, and it gets further off. The further away you get from it, so you have to go on another one, get back onto it. Right. But it's very important to use a retreat situation to really cultivate a good structure, a good foundation that you can use in your life, contemplating internally and externally what is form. So whether we're walking, sitting, standing, lying down, we can know this is the form that I denote as myself. This here. There's weight, movement, energy, so forth. Then external forms, houses, buildings, trees, other people's bodies, those. And essentially, on a symbolic level, they are all of the same. They all belong to the same realm, the realm of form. So whatever you can find in one form, you can find in any of them, really, on a contemplative level. When we consider things in this way, some of the envy, or the fascination, or the sense of comparison dies away. Like with all our own bodies, then these are very real things to us, aren't they? They have an actuality to them. Other people's bodies, we can develop kind of notions about. They look good or they look bad. better than me, and so forth. That they become, rather than form, they become self-conscious notions, reflecting back onto herself, what I'm like, where I'd like to be with that body, that form, or how it measures up to me. Rather than seeing this is form, and being in your body, I expect is very much the same as this sense of me and mine. It's the way it is. One doesn't feel fascinated by it or attracted to it. It doesn't something that you can really long for, or even feel repelled by. Actually, it's just the way it is. So that calms down. We're able to contemplate. Going to different places in different countries, what do we see? We see form. The houses, trees, buildings, and then it's pretty much the same, really, from a contemplative level. So you're not always restlessly moving around hither and thither to see this and touch that and taste this and feel this. You know that essentially it's going to produce the same messages: like, dislike, neutral. No, we can experience the whole world of form just sitting here. You know, everything that the world of form can show you, you can find out within this very body. You don't have to travel anywhere. And what's most important is you can find out all the perceptions and the ideas you can create around form and their cessation, when there's no longer the creation of notions, but a direct communion with the way things are. And this sense of direct communion, or samadhi, unification, being with the way things are, is where there's a joy, a brightness, tremendous sense of unity, rather than looking for it somewhere else. So this creates a kind of objectivity, doesn't it? By actually using this kind of means, this method. All the differences we can create, we know are what we create. And we can let things resolve into fundamental qualities. This is the means of meditation, contemplation. So you're not form, perceptions, liking and dislike, feelings, the world of feelings are things that we can search for, every different kind of feeling, whether it's bitter, bitter-sweet, sweet-bitter, sweet-sweet, very sweet, sweet-short, sweet and light, sweet and heavy, loud, strong, and all these kind of adjectives around the different ways things can affect us. And these are certainly we can divide it up into the innumerable distinct qualities. But for what can we manage? What is actually manageable for us to realize a certain clarity and detachment from, a certain objectivity towards it, is a pleasant, unpleasant, neutral world of feeling. Voila. This sums up Paris in the spring, London in the autumn, India in the summer, scuba diving, mountain climbing, highest to lowest, going to the moon and back, either pleasant, unpleasant, indifferent. That makes life a lot easier, doesn't it? You're never going to get beyond that. So, this means we're not avoiding things. You don't say, don't go anywhere ever again. But there's none of this, not the compulsion or the inner agitation to think that I'm missing out. I'm missing out on life because I haven't, had pleasant, unpleasant and indifferent? Maybe this seems a bit brutal. But the aim is not to be just kind of nihilistic and brutal about life, but to provide a framework to make things manageable for us. So of course we can still go scuba diving, mountain climbing, or anything like that if we so wish. But then with this mind that's looking, how does this feel? Does it feel pleasant, unpleasant, indifferent? Just trusting in the contemplative view means that life starts to simplify by itself, because we begin to this awakening mind begins to cultivate some wisdom. Well, what is right for me? Then in this particular situation, you can do this, and so forth. You contemplate these same elements in this situation. But what is most important is to be able to contemplate it. So be very honest with yourself. Not what are the things you can contemplate. Maybe you could meditate better, jogging, running up and down, or you don't need to sit on a retreat to do it. But be honest with yourself. What really helps you to stand back and look at things? Is it when the life is very varied and full and stimulating and pulling you out every which way, with many different kinds of experiences, or do you find it more helpful to simplify it all? So this will help you to recognize, say, not just what a retreat's about, but how to give yourself some support and guidance in your life. Just reflections like that. If you find that you can contemplate things better when life is very varied and so forth, then this is what one should do. I found it more helpful the other way, because that provides a base for tranquility and dispassion. Now, with contemplation of feeling, Vedana, this so-called heap or category. To channel our ways of recognizing and knowing things. And once we understand this, then with some help, we can recognize why we experience suffering and how to put an end to that, which is the aim of our practice. So, pleasant feeling. Look into, are things pleasant or unpleasant? Because particularly on a retreat like this, then there may be acute or discomfort, and the mind can have unpleasant feelings in it. But there are also other situations which are, so we don't find especially pleasant, being slightly cool when it's outside, when we walk outside. Maybe at the first few moments that feels unpleasant, or perhaps we find it pleasant and refreshing, and then it becomes unpleasant after a while, getting cold, brr. Nice to go inside. We come inside, nice and warm, pleasant, sit down. And then that passes away. As you've been hearing every morning and evening, Vedana is anicca. Feeling is impermanent. Comes and goes. The same thing can be pleasant at one time and then unpleasant later on. That which is neutral thing, like the breath. You can't say the breath is really pleasant or unpleasant, but we can create pleasure or displeasure around that. It's neutral. But what do you do with neutrality? First, one may find it calm, and various pleasant adjectives, calm, tranquil, something I can compose myself on, feeling of steadiness. Oh, that's pleasant, isn't it? Then notice Vedana is impermanent. After a while, boring, dull, stodgy, not interesting, not getting anywhere, can't keep hold of it, unpleasant. Now, breaths, although they don't vary that much in tone, do they? What's happening? They're implanting pleasant, unpleasant feelings, Vedana. Now, contemplating this around just normal things, not around acutely agonizing, anguished feelings or delightful feelings, just around the normal, neutral or slightly unpleasant and pleasant feelings that we can experience in this situation. And this is called the middle way, so it's aiming at round about the middle of feeling. We're not being beaten up or banqueted, but say that there are distinct tonal differences, and yet those can, in a retreat, those can become massive, can't they? The discomfort of sitting for a while, we can make absolutely anguished. You could sit thinking, I can't stand agony, pain, screaming with agony, and yet in terms of what the pain that human beings can experience just without any malice, just in sickness, toothache, say, the kind of sicknesses and diseases that we all have to cope with or are going to happen to us, this is nothing out of the ordinary. The discomfort or the pain of sitting is nothing really beyond the normal bounds of what's going to happen to us in our life. You break a leg, and then maybe you don't break a leg, but you get a headache, a toothache. We must have all had those. They are very acute. Or we're all probably going to get some disease that kills us sooner or later. It will be extremely painful. Or giving birth to a child. Extremely painful feeling, I've heard. That's what I heard. And yet it doesn't stop people having babies, does it? They don't say, obviously it seems to be very popular habit, occupation. There's probably more people having babies than sitting in meditation. And yet I think in terms of physical pain and the kind of prolonged difficulties and struggles and problems of bearing child, meditation retreat is a breeze, compared with that. These are just very normal things I'm talking about. I'm not talking about being beaten up or tortured, but just the middle of what a human being has to experience. Of course, the difficulty is that in this situation, we think, I don't have to. I don't see why I should. Whereas if you're having a baby that's coming out of your body, you can't think, well, maybe. It's a little late for that. It's going to happen, isn't it? Or if you've got I suppose if you've got a toothache, you can go to a dentist and get it pulled and such like. But if you have an incurable disease that you can't do anything about, it's in fact that possibility of things being other than they are, that means the mind has this movement of, I don't want this, push it away, I don't see why I should be with this, maybe I could do that. And that is what stimulates the Vedana, the mind's imposition of feeling. Because the most unpleasant feeling is to be with something that you don't like. Period. And that are those things, we can't say we like pain. The possibility of it being otherwise means that we constantly oscillate between being with it, trying to do something about it, make it otherwise. And that is what stimulates this recognizing things in terms of being unpleasant. Now, if we go back to feelings that are not hardly one would call uncomfortable at all, really, say, much slighter feeling, like if you go outside and perhaps, you didn't put your sweater on, and it's just a little bit cold. Now, if you stand and feel that feeling, then you can consider it in your mind. As long as you go into that feeling with a negative attitude or worry, I'm going to catch my death out here, I'm going to be cold. I should have brought my sweater. Maybe, why didn't I bring my sweater? That person looks really warm, they've got a thick coat on. Then that feeling is going to build up, isn't it? Cold, nasty, unpleasant, don't like it, horrible. So we can see how Vedana can be increased. And then if we think, well, I'll only be here for half an hour, and or we don't allow ourselves to get negative about it. Well, cold. How cold is cold anyway? It's feeling. It's cold. It certainly there's that not liking it. But then the actual sensation of coldness is this way, isn't it? And then there's the not liking. No, we're actually willing to go into the sensation, and then the feeling can stop. And in Pali language, these are different words altogether. We could say, I feel cold in English, and I often blur, haven't got that precise use of terminology, but feeling in Dharma language always means painful, pleasant, or indifferent. So we don't feel cold. There is a sensation of cold, and then a feeling unpleasant. So the sensation is as it is, and the feeling is relative. If it's been very hot in here, then we might find that cold sensation, what an unpleasant feeling. If we actually go to the sensation and go into it, then the feeling can cease. There's no pleasant, unpleasant, indifferent. It's just this way. It's cold. Say if you can use these simple things, or pleasant feeling, right? When you say if you're tired and you lie down or on your side, that lying down can feel pleasant, relief to no longer be standing or sitting. You lie down, pleasant feeling. Out of what? That just the sensation, or the ending of the sensation. Feeling arises, but that feeling is impermanent, isn't it? You can't. Sometimes, you think sitting all day, agonising. Be nice to just lie down in a big soft bed. Bliss. Just kind of lie down where there's none of this having to hold the body up, and the stiffness in the bones and aching sinews. Lie down in a nice, soft bed with a duvet over me, warm. No need to put any effort into anything. So nibbana. A hot bath. And yet you can't actually, they are pleasant for a while, but they become unpleasant. Even you lying down isn't pleasant for very long, while you get stiff and restless. And the lack of energy in the body doesn't feel very good. It's being relaxed all the time. Your body starts to lose its tone. It doesn't feel bright. It has no vigour in it. You just feel slack, and then your mind gets dull and fuzzy. And you probably fall asleep, or you start daydreaming and wondering about this, that and the other, want to eat something, drink something, go for a run, get out of bed, jump around, go and sit even. if you've ever had to lie down in bed when you're sick, it's difficult. I'm not very often ill, but I damaged my back a little while ago. I had to lie down for about a week, just lying there looking at the ceiling. And lying down, unpleasant feeling. But at first it was quite nice, a few hours. And then the soreness of lying down, the kind of sensation of the skin on the bed, wanting to shift and fidget around a bit. And every time you shifted it hurt and so forth. And just being limited to that position was painful. And then not having any vigor in the body. When you sit upright, you can actually get vigor into the body, like a feeling of toned up brightness, which is pleasant. I mean, I could sit up straight. Vedana is impermanent. Pleasant, unpleasant feelings, neutral feelings they don't abide in them, don't believe in them, don't rest on them, don't think that that's the way they are. This is what we impose. Now, we're dealing with the level of pleasure and pain that is manageable. And you'd be surprised how manageable it is when there is, when we start to investigate rather than always think, deal with it or repress it. We have a pleasant feeling, repress that. Pleasure. You know what happens when I get pleased? I can run completely amok and indulge and then regret it 3 weeks later. Well, of course, that can be the case if we haven't ever cultivated any restraint. I used to be very, very frightened of pleasant feeling. Like first few years of meditation, because I lived a very unrestrained life. Anything pleasant, I just go and grab it and go really indulge in it. So that set up the karmic result of that was the fear of pleasure, because I couldn't trust what I would do when anything got pleasant. Knowing, I'd got this inbuilt recognition that anything pleasant I'm just going to go straight into and not come out of again until 3 weeks later with a headache or something like that. Really quite damaging the body, that lust after pleasure. So one has to cultivate this sense of restraint, not out of just a puritanical desire for some notion of purity, but just because what can we manage? And then when we have got restraint, begins to be part of our mode of operating, to hold things together, to collect, to wisely consider, to measure out, to know when one is going over the top. Then, of course, pleasant feeling need no longer be frightening or thing that makes you reckless. You can contemplate. Pleasant feeling is this way. And changing. Not that we shouldn't have it or that it's unworthy, but that it changes. So it's not worth basing one's life upon. Because you can't do it. How many pleasant things, if you stay with them, really stay pleasant for long? If you look at a beautiful picture, a beautiful flower, how long can you look at it before you get bored? It's not because it's like with eating food, the most delightful food, even before you get physically satiated, or not dependent upon physical satiation, but just the taste consciousness. After a while, eating, mangoes every day, boring. Yeah. Or caviar and avocados, what a drag, that again. Because it's impermanent, it's changing. Contemplate this internally and externally in the world around you, in your meditation practice. When you're dealing with the internal sense spheres. So putting this to work, when you experience, say, pain in your sittings, then it's not, as long as you're trying to get over it, then you're believing in pain as a reality, rather than the contemplative view, which puts you in this position of, I'm willing to look at this, I'm not jumping to any conclusions about the way it should or shouldn't be. Now, how is it? And then if it's extremely painful, then it's better not to stay with that. If you really feel that is damaging or causing you to go into such a anxious, frenzied state that you can't maintain you can't respond to it at all, you're just getting locked into fear or tension, then it's better to not to move or to shift or to whatever you need to do to alleviate that. But if it's where you can feel there's a sense of a quality or something, looking, recognizing, and the phenomenon itself, and then you contemplate this relationship between the two. Is the looking trying to push that, damp it down, change it, or what? And we can use the pain to clarify our mode of relating to, until your mind becomes quite supple, open, willing, pliant. And this will make the sensation may still be there, but the painfulness of it dwindles. That's just for, say, more acute feelings. And then the nothing special feelings, where you can feel dull and bored, everything's the same. Notice what one feels inclined to. Because keeping in touch with these means that you don't just follow, you're not getting impulses that you're not recognizing. Wherever there's pleasant feeling, there will be movement in towards that. Say we're sitting and we like to sit. Good, the body feels strong, bright, and pleasant feeling, and then it's time to walk. Oh, I want to walk. I think I need to sit some more develop my practice. Rather than pleasant feeling that one develops a fondness for. Because following feeling will never take you to the end of suffering. It will only take you to the change of feeling. And then this becomes quite helpful when we begin to contemplate the mind, the pleasure of, say, when there is calm in the mind, or when there is brightness in the mind. Not that you're denying these as helpful states, but to use these as foundations rather than as things that we just get the pleasant feeling out of, and then we more. It will never take you to the end of suffering. So you begin to use a means of contemplation that relates to internal world, external world, the sense bases, body and mind, by making a note, recognizing, how do you feel about it? What's the feeling about this? Are you enjoying this talk? Pleasant? Unpleasant? Neutral? It's not that there should be one or the other, but as long as you know that, then this will help you to understand whether you're suffering or not. Being with what's pleasant is where we feel enjoyment, and where being with what is unpleasant is where we feel pain. But in the ending of feeling, it's not either pleasant nor painful. It is as it is. If you're really enjoying the talk, this is great, this is much better than sitting here watching my breath, having somebody talk about it. Let's read a book, have an interview, play a few cassettes, learn all about meditation, but as long as I don't have to do any of it. It's always more inspiring that way. Then this is setting yourself up for suffering, isn't it? Because there's only so many cassettes and only so many talks, and before they become, I've heard this, I know that, I heard that yesterday. So what? I'm still doing this, that. No even pleasant feeling is the way this is, and then we recognize it ends, and then, okay. Somewhat a little bit wistful about that, of course. Pleasant feeling end. Oh, right, okay. But something that's recognised is that we have to get beyond these as things that we hold to or feel hurt and offended by them disappearing. To create suffering around it is not necessary. So whenever anything pleasant ends, there is that little movement of slight sigh. But that's part of nature, really. Separation from the loved. But then we can recognize that this is just human nature, and then, okay, start with where it's at now, accept that. The sadness and the happiness of our lives, without clinging, holding, complaining, being jealous, feeling left out, not getting enough. Why did this happen to me? Feelings. In the contemplation of feeling, there is the ending of suffering. Bring this into your practice, and as you're contemplating the breath, as you're walking up and down, as you're being around in this retreat center, remember the whole form of the day is the retreat. Every moment of it is a retreat time. Relaxing, eating, lying down, having a bath is part of the retreat. And helping yourself to look at this by these means, these figurative means, these reflective means, so that all of this is conducive to your welfare and understanding. Note them as they are, from moment to moment. Particularly when you feel really held by feeling, and then strengthen your recognition of feeling around things that seem to be relatively not much or the other, but you find yourself impelled one way or hanging on because you haven't really noticed feeling. So I offer this for your reflection.